1, 2, 3, 4.
One, two, 1, 2. You're listening to the Online Time Fame Podcast. I'm your host, JD. Thank you for listening to this show. We have a good show today. Now, let me say this, that Online Time Fame is not about the fame, because now we have a new wave of fame that comes from digital platforms and social media. Completely different than the days in the past before the 2000s, when media, traditional media, the main television stations, and then cable television, they were secondary and interrelated to that too, as being TV and radio. Those were the main mediums that people, you knew they made it. If an artist was featured, a comedian, some type of individual, that an entertainer was featured on one of those big stations, one of those big platforms, that meant that someone had probably heard about them, or they were doing well, because they still had to be successful even then. So when you look at the first appearance of certain comedians and they made it, onto those platforms, they had honed their crafts somewhere underground, unknown, and just in those niche places at that comedy club. And someone, those major companies used to send talent scouts out and look for acts and who's the new and up and coming individual. But the point is, they had to be on point. Whereas now, with online times, the online times that we live in, online time fame is different. It's a good thing because one could be self-made. And it's another thing where sometimes there's no filter, there's no regulation, there's no standards. There's no minimum standards of conduct, of professionalism, or let's just say respectability, or not to judge, but there's, television, you couldn't come any kind of way. You couldn't say anything. You had to be on point. So people who grew up seeing that knew that there were standards and there was a certain way to conduct themselves to be the best they could for the listener. And, in exchange for the benefit of those listeners, giving attention and helping those individuals rise to what they became, people had an exchange of a mutual exchange of respect and dignity that was shown. So we mentioned that a lot of people, there's three ways of looking at life. And even as we pursue media and many of the pursuits just of how we move every day, we say small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. That's the general saying that people have been saying since forever. So when we're talking about, so we do mention people, like, as you see, the every so often there's a so-called name, whether it be in the streets or whether it's in life, someone is the most popular at that moment. So that individual transcends being someone we're talking about. They become a force. They have that light, so to speak. Every so often that individual that has that attention of the masses, they transcend just being a name. And that's what happened to Charleston White. So when people say Charleston White, yes, they can make address him personally. It's also him being addressed as an entity, as someone who transcended. Like, there's certain people, as we know in the digital world, they become popular. And, and as they do that, so as I said, we can't say don't mention people. We mention Charleston White. People know to get, Charleston White did in an interview, he said, I'm the algorithm now, and people do reaction videos, and I guess they call them reaction videos. You have critiques and criticism and social commentary. Those are all accepted, and sometimes they have to mention people. But in journalism, one strives to have a certain level of neutrality. It's not based on personal attacks. Even on these terms and conditions for these platforms, terms and conditions are not to repetitively disparage and talk down on people. And that's part of, but, sometimes, I could say as Asiatic people, as so-called black people, one has to look at themselves, all groups, but one has to look at maybe the dysfunctional nature of all groups, different groups, all groups within their own group has certain dysfunctional elements. And historically, for how so-called black folk have been brought up, there's a lot of pain and neglect and issues that have occurred that have caused certain types of behavior to be acceptable. And negativity in this era is acceptable. It was a time when they used to say, the old timers and the great grandparents used to say, if you can't say nothing good about somebody, don't say nothing at all. So they'd ask about people and then people wouldn't say nothing. But with this online time fame, with this online time and the digital internet and the social media, negativity gets attention. You have to say something negative for certain audiences just to get attention. And that's no different than some of the right-wing political people. They say outlandish things as well to cater to an audience that may want to hear that, even though they might know it's not necessarily true. It's called race politics. So a lot of people play those politics. So, as I guess if you go back in history to the 1990s, there was a movie called Juice starring Omar Epps and Tupac Amaru Shakur. And then in the movie, at the end of the movie, when Tupac was, coming to the end, at the end of that film, Omar Epps, was told by some people, you got the juice. That was the whole meaning, like you got the power. And so, in that movie. So Charleston White, in this era right now of 2025, he has the juice. He has the attention. So it's almost like to say his name is not really saying his name. He's transcended a certain level and reached a certain amount of fame now. So people say it because it's attention. But when we're talking about events and occurrences, it's a different conversation. Oh, that movie Juice, that was 19 with Tupac Shakur, and a lot of people was in it. And Omar, was it Omar Epps? Is it? Yeah, I think that was who it was. That was 1992. Yes, it was Omar Epps, Tupac Shakur, Jermaine Hopkins, and Khalil Kain. So those were some of the people in the movie. That was an Eric Dickerson film. He directed it, and that was, I guess they considered that movie an American crime thriller. That's what made it deep. It had, it had a little plot to it, and Pac brought something to it that they didn't expect. So that was a classic. Sometimes, we hear a lot of people right now in this so-called podcast. Now, the podcast is really audio, and podcasting is audio, and there's a game now where people try to get to who has popularity. And then so those popular circles, that's how traditional media used to be. If the people brought you in and they were popular in the mainstream entertainment world, they co-signed you and that helped you get attention. So it's the same way in this digital realm right now, where the famous people, they won't say people's name, or people try to say famous people to get attention. But when we bring it, just bring some information and some useful content and make that a part of it. Because podcasting ain't nothing but an extension of broadcasting. It ain't nothing but an extension of radio. It's almost like an independent radio station. So it's not like it's something exactly new. It's just that when you had radio stations, even when it was Sirius XM and all of that, which they have now. I'm saying when they first, rose to the prominence, the thing was there used to be 5 or 6 radio stations in any major city, depending on what genre it was. It wasn't that many radio positions. So it was more people who could be on the radio than was available to be on the radio. So podcasting just opened up an avenue where people could get an opportunity to share information and to do whatever they do in their realm. But let us just say this. But we mentioned but we just mentioned the Charleston White part because, as we said, a lot of people, because we would be hypocritical to say small minds talk about people, average minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. So it's not to say that there can't be some greatness in explaining somebody, because that individual is more than their entity that has risen above just being a common person. This is a public figure, put it like that. So that's why when we say online time fame, we're not here to be a public figure. I'm your host, JD, but we ain't here for that. Not, people used to say, well, you saying this, but you hiding. Nah, we look at fame and what fame has become. Who wants to be that? We'd all take the economics of it, but who wants to be that? Some people prefer to be famous. They want to be talked about. They want to be in the limelight. They want to be get that notoriety. But being what they used to call it, rich and famous, Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous was the old TV show back in the 80s or whatever. Being wealthy and being famous is two different things, because there's a lot of people that's famous, but they don't have the wealth to go with it. They don't have the so-called riches. So at this point, the way people are and the evilness of the nature of people and how they try to, so-called expose and embarrass, all that's negative attention. All that's negative energy that will do nothing but destroy. And are we here to build or destroy, to uplift or take down? And that's why people in this country taking each other down is outsiders looking to finish the job. See, finish off the U.S. for what it is. So that's why I try to be positive, strive to be positive. And also, but as we say, we do mention, so the Charleston White part is the wave. Everybody putting that in their titles and striving to get attention, and that can be part of how digital media works. Yeah, all right. If that's what they do, all right. But add something to that. Now let us talk about this for a split second. If you look right now at the top sites and businesses and that are really sponsoring podcasts, it's gambling, betting, gambling websites, FanDuel, DraftKings, Fanatics, even ESPN has gambling. That changed sports. It ruined sports in my viewpoint. And I'll explain why. Because even if I keep a neutral view, which people supposedly performing and working in journalism, they're supposed to be neutral and present both sides of the story. They can have their opinion, but that's when you see certain shows and it'll have a segment where somebody talks their opinion. Overall, it's not even supposed to be that. The so-called presenter is supposed to be in the middle, where they present the issue and they're not even in it. But as we talk about FanDuel, DraftKings, and Fanatics, and is a number of gambling sites, this is what makes them so gangster. They give away funds to start. They're like, we'll put in this much funds in your account. So they get you started free. And that's just like back in the street level. Didn't so-called drug dealers used to give people some initial drugs free? Hey, yeah, try this. Check this out. Here, this is on the house. And then once they get people hooked, no, it ain't free no more. So, sports you can't really mix legal gambling in sports, because sports was supposed to be untainted. They had gambling already. They had underground gambling. They had neighborhood people who kept track of betting. They already had gambling, just like they already had the lottery. And then the states took over the lottery system. They already had a lottery. Yes, there can be advantages to the legal side of it. Sometimes the illegal people didn't pay. But sometimes the state won't pay. If you owe some so-called money, you owe so-called back taxes or child support, they'll take your payment too. But anyway, a lot of these people who we look at as they're successful, and they got these successful podcasts. When you look at who their sponsors are, look at the ones who their sponsors are gambling sites. So that means they had to take that gambling cash. They also supposedly already wealthy, and they had to take that gambling sponsorship. So they're pushing gambling on the side. Gambling is weak. Gambling is predatory. Don't gamble, because you can't win. You'll win here and there. You win in a little sometimes, but the house always wins. The odds are in favor of the company. The odds are in favor of the gambling site. They have mathematicians, statisticians, expert mathematician people who make formulas for these bets. So you're not going to beat them. Even when it was Vegas. Vegas is corporate now, but back then it was street. It was still, the odds were against people, but people knew, that's those gangsters. So it wasn't looked at as positive. It's Vegas. It's the one. All right, we're going to have some vice and some negativity in this one state right here in this place. We got it, and they can do it. Then they said, well, we can do it over here in Atlantic City. That's where you can just keep it over there. It's like a red light district. Now it's everywhere. So now we celebrate when somebody has a casino. Oh, they got a casino. So this is an artist, these musicians and different people trying to step forth and bring these casinos to light. That's the best business you can think of. But but look at it. It's entertainers, and come on, man. You know what they say about entertainers.
These are puppets and clowns and have been made celebrities.
I mean, that was Malcolm X, and we played that clip a few times. That was Malcolm, and that Malcolm X wasn't talking about everybody, and we're not talking about everybody. Malcolm X, that was he was at UC Berkeley in 1963, and he did a speech, and he was they asked some celebrities about him, about some issue that was, if I'm correct, it was in a survey in Newsweek, and they asked some celebrities about some people, and he called them out as being puppets and clowns, like stick to entertainers. You know what they say nowadays, just dribble the basketball. A lot of people even now in podcasting, they jump out and they say something in podcasting, and they're a celebrity. It's somebody else they got it from online that was saying that same thing 5 years ago. 10 years ago. That's late, but now that it's mainstream, because this so-called celebrity has gotten it, because it's become a lucrative way for entertainers to make funds. They can't make records no more. I mean, ain't no young 18-year-old individual listening to no 60-year-old dude rhyming. And then the thing about sometimes the 60-year-old that might have skill, they don't have no relation of nothing to say no more. They spent their load. They don't have no other conversation. I mean, they should be talking about paying bills and mortgages, rhyming about that. Rhyme about trying to pay their keep their car, get a tune up at the local mechanic shop or something. Just it's things that can be done, but people they outgrew their usefulness of their knowledge. Because if somebody is 18 and they overhear their uncles talking about something deep, and then you see an 18-year-old dude seems like he's dropping science, that's like, oh, he's only 18 and he's that smart. But this same dude is now 45, 50. They ain't that far advanced. They haven't advanced that far mentally, intellectually, intelligently, knowledge-wise. They ain't, this is one thing about actors. I at least give actors the credit on this. And you could say MCs to a degree, but not really. Because as you say, is when we look at what they do and they jump in, I couldn't remember this individual's name, and I wanted to get it real quick. Shap, that's his last name. If you put Shap and you do a search on him and Jazz and Shap. He has a cousin. There's a couple Shaps in the broadcasting business. There's one of their sons is a sports journalist, and then they had another famous journalist relative. But this Shap, he talks about jazz. He's a DJ, and he does jazz, and he'll play the record, and he's great because he'll say, yeah, that was 1941, Dizzy Gillespie, and on that session they had a problem with the electricity wasn't working right because the lighting when the recording wasn't on, and so then the Charlie Parker came in, and he said he wasn't really ready because he had just come in on a train from Detroit, and then they got in the session, and then they played, and this is the recording right here. Like I like that type of history, because that's what you'll see when you read those jazz books. When you read the jazz books, that's how they talk about it. So he knows like the history of all the records, so that makes it interesting. So we see a degree of that today, where we see a lot of MCs, like, rappers from back in the 2000s, early 2000s, and they're talking about, that's a big industry where you got people talking about what Pac and them were doing, and when they made this record, and they used to go in the meeting rooms and do this, and then, so that nostalgia, looking back, because our group of so-called black folk, they like old entertainers and old entertainment. Where like, and nothing wrong, but so they're able, we look back at nostalgia a lot. As a country, the U.S. is very nostalgic, but a lot of so-called black folk, they look at a lot of artists from back then, and that artist may not be what they were, but they still may be there. Well, I'm going to try to be this now. I'm going to do this podcast, or I'm going to do that. And they may have experience, and they may be able to transition like it never was what that was. Like if you go to one of the top urban, so-called, if that's the word for it, I just say urban because maybe the category is that. The top urban so-called podcaster is Joe Budden. But Joe Budden is proven as an artist. He had a record deal before. He put out some albums. He was with Eminem's company in the 2000s, where I think he was in this group It was a group they had. I forget. Eminem's had a couple of groups that he signed. Some Detroit people, and maybe Joe Budden was on that. Then Joe Budden went independent, and he was able to sell a lot of records independently on his own. So he was self-made from that way. So then when he transitioned to podcasting, long before it just became the thing to do, because you could see he's intelligent. His conversation, he knows how to articulate. So he's one of them smart people, just in general. So he ain't the common average one. So when he does his shows, it's from it's a lot of years of experience, and he was before people. So when people counted him out, he reinvented himself. Then he reinvented himself again. People used to laugh because podcasting ain't new. Podcasting goes back. Some people say they were they started podcasting, or I was podcasting. Well, whenever it was invented, because a lot of things were invented at a certain time, around the early 2000s, the late 1990s. That's when stuff came in. So everybody knew about it that was from back then, but they may not have done it because it was there. They had platforms for it, but since the internet was still new, everybody wasn't really checking for it. And as I said, one had to really have a concept for it or just want to do it. But it wasn't but now it just seems like everybody's doing it, but people knew about it. Anybody who reads regularly knew what a podcast was when the podcast began. It ain't like it just popped up. And as I said, by the time so-called black folk find out about something, it's already been around for a long time. So it's not that situation. But like I said, when it was, the early 2000s, of course, we could, name that. But, because that, as I said, before that, it was college radio. And speaking of college radio, let me just do a brief mention of something. Speaking of independent radio. Wait a minute. No, we'll come back to that. Pardon me. So let's get back to the sports betting. So with the sports betting, the thing was, sports and gambling it's illegal for an athlete to bet on themselves and because or alter games and alter their performance because they are betting. So that's why they like to keep athletes away from gambling, because they didn't want it to be where they get in debt and then outside gambling forces are telling them, hey, I'll give you this funds if you miss this jump shot in the third quarter. So that's why sports and gambling is very different. But today, sports ain't even what it was, because it's more entertainment based now. It's more influenced. Like sports always had influence to it, because referees control the games and commissioners control the referees. So there was it was not so much as the players can, affect the game, but referees and scoring can always be manipulated. So that's why that's professional sports, which is more considered entertainment. Same thing happens in amateur sports, but amateur sports is supposed to be more pure, more for the ethics of health and building character and aspects and principles that help children grow. Like it's better to be in sports than hanging out at the local pool hall or on the street. Sports were accredited with keeping people focused. They did their homework, they played sports, and it was a childhood game, and it had a certain level of purity associated with it. So that's why people did that. But when these dudes is all celebrating people, trying to get casinos, that's a user. That's like most people who they're bragging about selling drugs and they're showing their faces. Drug people who sold drugs and was criminals and doing this and that, what they did, no one can judge them for that. But sometimes it's better to just be in the background, because nobody needs to hear nobody talk about don't do crime. Everybody is told that when they're a child, unless they was at the most dysfunctional household where they condone criminality, and that is a true thing. But as far as the morals, that's why today there's not as much morals in society, because they'll show anybody on TV. Just like when let's go back for an example. When you go back to the civil rights movement, I don't remember the year of what this was, when the woman Rosa Parks, maybe it was in Montgomery, Alabama, got when the so-called Negroes had to ride on the back of the bus, and Rosa Parks supposedly didn't want to give up her seat that was orchestrated. She worked she was affiliated with the NAACP, and they orchestrated that in order to file a lawsuit. So they manufactured an event to launch the lawsuit for. And there was a pregnant woman, so-called a Negro woman. She was pregnant, but she was a young girl. She was the first one to refuse, one of the first who refused to get up out of her seat, but they didn't want to use her as the face of the lawsuit because she was an unwed teenage mom. So, so that's why I say, but today a woman can be pregnant and be, or whatever, not married. And she's on the forefront talking like she's the moral standard of life. They ain't show all of those types of people on TV back then. When you go back and look at that TV time and some of those TV stations that show those old shows up until a certain year, like in the 1960s, they couldn't show a married couple sleeping in the same bed. When you went back to certain shows, like I guess it's I Love Lucy, back in the 50s, they was married in a separate bed because you couldn't show two people, a male and a female, a married couple in the same bed. That's how far we've come to all this weird stuff now, where you watch TV and all you see is debauchery. You see Sodom and Gomorrah. All you see is stuff that's immoral, according to religious texts, according to by Christianity, Muslim, and just certain religions where they're doing sinful activities according to the books. So anyway, when you get back to sports, all these people celebrating opening up casinos. If you opening up a casino, to me, you trying to rob me in a legal way. It's trickery, it's usury, it's teetering on usury and capitalizing on other people's misery. That ain't no building business. That ain't nothing where you building and elevating no community. You just perpetrating a hustler. Because a real hustler would be like, oh yeah, that's great. That's why it's supposedly at first, all the people who were getting cannabis licenses were supposed to be former people who were convicted selling marijuana. That's who they was. But I'm like, well, goddamn, I never sold no weed. I knew about it. I was right there with it, but I wasn't with it. But you mean I can't get a license? I ain't even get no conviction for that. So it's all, the society is backwards. But as I said, people trying to, these are millionaires, and that's the only thing you can think of is a casino. So therefore, if I walk in with $1,000, I'm doing bad. I got to buy my children some braces. Wife talking about she want a new car. My rent is due, but I'm on my way home with my check, and I got $1,000. But I'm gonna swing over here to Queens right quick, and I'm gonna see if I can flip my paycheck on some gambling. Yeah, you can win. See, that's who you are as a casino owner. So if you're a gangster, I get it.
The street is the street, always.
I give you that credit. The street is the street. But you got these dudes who wasn't even street. They wasn't there. Predator getting money from dudes who was wannabes, who always wanted to be around these cats. Jumping on records saying dudes' real names that was gangsters. That ain't fly. Whole nother show. That's a whole nother show. But they ain't know them dudes, because the real dudes who had real money don't come on TV. They don't come on no radio. It's always a group of dudes around them dudes who be hiding from the cameras. So anyway, back to predatory behavior when it comes to casinos and gambling. So this is the downfall of gambling and sports began in 1992. Now, that came with the Olympics, USA basketball, and the 1992 so-called supposed dream team. What happened was, if I'm correct, the 1988 team, the Olympic basketball, men's basketball team in 1988 lost the gold medal. They lost. Before then, the United States had won the USA had won the gold medal for like almost 20 years, from the 70s or something like that. They had been winning. And other countries had professional athletes. They had people who were Olympic athletes, but they got a stipend every year, and they didn't even play professional sports because some of them didn't have no professional basketball program like the NBA or anything. They didn't have, Europe wasn't developed like it became in the 70s and up until the 80s. They didn't have the salaries where they were paying, but they did get a stipend to play for their country. You probably got a free apartment, probably gave you and you got a check. So in essence, they were considered professionals. The U.S. has stipends for their amateur athletics, but you have to raise funds, and you was only going to play for 4 years anyway. For if you're going to play that Olympic, you're going to, like, if you came out of college, then if you happen to not be in the Olympic year that the Olympics were when you graduated from college sports, you waited maybe 1 or 2 years if you had to. If you did go play the Olympics, and then they turned professional, and that was like maybe more or less. Most track and field wasn't even professional back then. They didn't have the meets weren't as popular yet back then. So they try to get an endorsement deal, and it might not be no avenue for them, but basketball had a direct avenue. Football didn't have Olympics, but track and field, baseball, I don't think they was in the Olympics either. Pardon, but they had, some specific sports. But the point is, the 1992 Dream Team was supposed to be revenge. Yeah. They had Larry Bird, professional player from the Boston Celtics, Magic Johnson of the Los Angeles Lakers, Michael Jordan of the Chicago Bulls, Charles Barkley, and the list went on of all of the professionals who came to play for the 1992 Dream Team so they could show the world who's boss. But it didn't matter, because now, if you had to resort to turning your professional athletes into to play amateur sports, and you had to change the U.S. Olympic Committee rules to allow professionals to now enter Olympic competition, that was a downfall. That was a defeat. That meant the college players wasn't as good no more, because college players always beat international players in international competition. So that means the U.S. fell off right there. If you this means these dudes nowadays ain't as good. After 92, they wasn't able to ball no more. Jordan and them crushed the Olympic team in 1984. Jordan went to the 84 Los Angeles Olympics and balled and crushed the world. So you telling me you got to bring this dude back in 92 just to prove a point? Because the 88 Olympic players couldn't get it done. The coaching was bad. And they just wasn't, but it just changed. The world got better, and you didn't. So anyway, the sports was defeated at that point, basketball and amateurism and the concepts of it. And now that they brought in gambling, that the stuff is all the way potentially tampered with. So take it back one more time. There's another funny part of the story. Walt Frazier, the legendary player who played for the New York Knicks. He's out of Atlanta, Georgia. My people met him when he passed away. My people met Walt Frazier when he first came to New York. That's a whole nother story. And as a good individual, nothing crazy. But, he used to frequent one of the businesses that my people worked at, that my family. And, but another thing is, Frazier, Walt Frazier he was 6'5", I think, top guard. And 1969-1970 season, he led the New York Knicks to their first NBA championship in 1970. They defeated, who was that? I don't even remember who I tried to take some notes. I think it played, was it Los Angeles? But I know they won the series. That was 100. And, you ever heard that saying when they say nobody remembers who came in second place? And I won't say that. I just don't know. That's way before me knowing about basketball. But the Knicks won 113-99. And Walt Frazier had 36 points, 19 assists, and 7 rebounds. And it's a team effort, and everybody else made it. They played great and made it where he could do that. But the point is, he went after that series, and he went and bought him a 2-tone Rolls Royce. That was Walt Frazier. He used to dress like, real like jazzy and fly. His nickname was Clyde, Walt Clyde Frazier. Like, Bonnie and Clyde. He wore the gangster hats and the gangster suits. And he had that gangster image. And that was the heyday of New York. The 70s, money was flowing. Streets was getting it. So because he performed on the court at the level he did, he won. He performed 36, 19, and 7. Man, he parked his car In the street, he was that dude because he performed. He was making the NBA money. Not to say it was close to even a fraction of what they make today, but he did what you're supposed to do. He won that championship. So he had there was a certain aura around Walt Frazier at that time. Like he wasn't just sizzle. Today, players lose, but when they get their paycheck, they living large. They making the money of a champion, and they not even a champion. They made hundreds of millions playing basketball and never won a title. A lot of these players, and then a lot of these players, they playing in the U.S. and soon, and they from another country. They family from somewhere else, but instead of them playing for that country where their families is from, they play for the U.S. And then when it's time for them to play against that country, you know what they do? They tell the coach, coach, can I not get in the game? I don't really want to beat my country. You beat your country a long time ago when your family left for the prosperity of America. See, you build a country, because if we look right now, the U.S. is falling. So if the U.S. collapsed, everybody would flee back to where their families is from. But one thing about American descendants of slavery, they became a whole nother group of people. They not Africans. When people be like, we are all African. Africa ain't even the real name of the continent, which comes from the word Africa. And people be saying it came from this Greek individual who his name was Africanus. It is somebody with a name, something like that. But the point is, that's a whole nother story. Or what the original, and it ain't Africa anyway, it's the continent of Africa, and there's 54 countries, approximately. I think 52 to 54 countries. So anyway, these people come, and then when they, stand up and profess they love for their country, no, they was blending in like they was everybody else at first. And then they step up, or no, so whatever. We know what that means. But the point is, they wasn't winners. Not to say that one ain't a winner when they don't win the championship. It's just that when Walt Frazier did win that championship in 1970, by him having the 36 points, the 19 assists, the 7 rebounds, buying the Rolls Royce wasn't looking like nothing but something he earned. It was respected. Like, yeah, that's that dude. He's the top guy. So when he was all at the clubs and the spots, everybody respected him. Nobody bothered him. That's like when Mike Tyson was winning. When Mike Tyson was winning in the 80s, he didn't need no security. He might need security to keep him from jumping on somebody else. But for the most part, Mike had people with him, but Mike was loved when Mike was the champion. In the beginnings, when he started winning the heavyweight titles. So, but today's athlete, they make hundreds of millions, and they spend the majority of their time getting chicks pregnant that they ain't married to, having millions of dollars in child support. No disrespect for my saying that, because they do have seminars and people that come into the rookie, what they used to call it in college. They used to call these sessions they have when you first orientation, the new player orientation. They have a whole program telling the players what to watch for. The National Basketball Association in football, they have whole detective. They have the detective division that keeps track of certain people being seen with certain players, telling people, no, don't mess with them, don't be over there. But when it come to women, these dudes be letting loose like ain't nobody's business. Just shooting up clubs with man making babies and risking disease. If you want to go get a disease, go around them dudes, because they sleeping with everything raw diggy. No disrespect, but the point is, when you look at the news, and this is a cultural trend. Like, man, you child support it out. God damn. But so some people, man, they're plants in this sports world. Straight up plants. But the thing is, they don't know they're plants, because they ain't got no talent. A lot of these entertainers right now, they ain't talented. Once you show the willingness to go with the program, they can give you lyrics. They can give you beats. They can give you production. You got the best mixer in the world mixing your music. But you can see something's missing, because if your intellectual quotient is low, which helps push an agenda, you're a plant and don't even know it. That's the best plant. The best spy is the one don't know they spying. They talking to something. That's why the online is so law enforcement friendly, because people will get online and forget that they talking to something that everybody's listening to. Anybody could be listening, any law enforcement agent, any relative of somebody. So people hear, oh, you hear what this dude said? And that's why I said it's so, it's said in a neutral way. But as you watch a collapse of a society, in a demoralizing continuation of a people on a downward spiral, sometimes it's like, wait a minute, ain't nobody gonna say that? Because it ain't about talking about the people. It's talking about events and ideas. So when we talk about, oh, you got a casino, that's the best you can come up with. So we have ideas. We have to implement them ourselves. We can't just talk about people. Our people, our family, they do have something they made. It's called empowermentforthepeople.org. http://www.empowermentforthepeople.org or empowermentforthepeople.com. If so it can go there. If but the point is this: it teaches how people can start a business from nothing. Ain't no guarantee in starting a business, because there's a lot of components that go with it. But to have a beginner path to do that for free, which was inspired by Tupac Amaru Shakur's song "Keep Your Head Up," that was dedicated to the so-called black woman, to get her back in order. And that's it should be the family, and we apply it to the family. But it shows people how to get a business. Go to the website. They got the free instructions, and they got links to a book. The book is only like the lowest price allowed on Amazon for the ebook, but the instructions don't even need no purchase. They can just go to the website and see how they can raise themselves with little or no economics to have a health-related business, to branch into other realms. The health-related field is $1 billion industry. Weight loss, weight gain. And, so that's why when, that's something being done on the muscle. Our people ain't even got cash, but they came up with something that can help everybody. Free. Now, is it now with something behind it, it would be bigger than that. So the sustainability of it is the ebook they put out to explain more in detail. But the general idea and purpose, we don't hear no pro athletes talking like that. We just supposed to look at them. And the final point we'll make about professional athletes, again, that's empowermentforthepeople.org. That's the idea of it, but it's .com, empowermentforthepeople.com as well. But the idea of it is helping. And when we say great minds talk about ideas and solutions, that's a solution to raise people back to outside of poverty and income generation. It's a long shot to make it. Ain't no guarantee, but what is promoted is health, women's health, and what was that song from Tupac? Was that 1992? Keep Your Head Up, or was it 1993? So that's but the point is, it was Tupac's song that was the inspiration for that idea. Keep your head up. So from that call to action was the reason that the idea was sparked. When Pac said, will the real man get up? You got ladies, you got to keep your head up, like that. I'm not paraphrasing, but that's what the point was. So when Pac said that, that gave us an idea. Not go gambling, not betting on no sports. Nothing is being said to the people, but they just gambling on their own. And that's why I said the people who are chosen, who you think are doing certain stuff, keep your head up, pardon me. That's 1992. Tupac Amaru Shakur. So that's what people today are gravitating toward: greed, just, and usury, and putting us in positions that's very favorable to someone like the KKK. Lose all my cash. I just got my check. I don't got enough to feed my family. And I look up and I see a casino there. Nobody ain't making me go there. You know, nobody had to get high when drugs is on the corner, but it's there. So respect to the game. It's a freedom of expression. It's a legal establishment, but it ain't nothing respected. Oh, you gambling? If you know the streets, and criminality, I know you trying to get me. So I'm like, oh, all right, you trying to catch people who don't know what I know. You trying to catch somebody who thinks that you have a chance to win. Yeah, you might leave and win. They got to let somebody win to bring 10 more people in who lose. They let you win sometimes so you can go home and say, man, I just won 3,000. You tell 10 people that they need to get them other 10 to lose their money. So they get paid off 4 of those people. And the other 6 is all profit. So come on, man, ain't nobody respecting that. But the capacity of the people that's bringing that idea, that's where they're limited at. What do you expect? These ain't no high level thinking dudes. You write rhymes real well, poetry, that's great. But that's outside of that to an intellectual capacity of financial building. Implementation of policies. Nah, come on, man. Dudes is high school dropouts. Now, they got some high school dropouts that read. The thing is, the equalizer is reading, literacy. If you read books, you could be self-educated in this country to the level of degrees. So I ain't saying degrees mean that somebody is smarter, because that's the problem. Most of these people with degrees ain't really smart. They just got positioning, or they knew somebody. And we talking from basic administrative all the way up to presidencies. These people, man, come on. You watch people's decisions and actions, and that's when you see what the intelligence level is. That's why I say, if you know every dude coming out of sports is being chased by all these women, and what's their objective? Don't get none of these chicks pregnant. Don't be spreading these babies. Who's paying 10 and 20 and 25 and 30,000 a month for child support? 10,000 for no reason. Because they don't have focus. This dude never had. That's game. This is marks. These is lames. These ain't no fly dudes. That's why Walt Frazier epitomized the street in the early 70s as Walt Clyde Frazier. He never had children. Anyway, you know, he was out seen in the clubs, and from what I was told and taught, and you read books, if you read, you'll see, oh, that was Walt Frazier moving around. Everybody, you know, the articles are still there, but he delivered. You got dudes had 20 and 50 and 70, $80 million contracts. They barely got out the first round in the playoffs. They wasn't no superstars. They were stars in the league, and they benefited from a country that paid somebody who was one of the greatest in the world, if you're in the National Basketball Association. But it just, the heart was different. It became monetized. It became for the money, which is fine, because it's just a sport. It ain't important like that. It's just a sport, you know, and that's the thing. As I say, we play that speech sometime to remind people of what used to be said about how people are just like supposed to be important. But
These are puppets and clowns and have been made celebrities.
I mean, the people ain't really to be followed, or, you know, their example is followed of excellence and staying out of trouble. But as I said, when they start pontificating about something that's intelligent, forget all that, man. How can we get some economics? How can we generate some businesses and sustainability for the whole nation, not just for my community, all communities? How can we get it? That ain't the dude who can solve that. He got a wicked jump shot, nice layup game, but let it just be that. But we look for, you know, these people, so-called entertainers, for stuff that ain't really part of their job description.
This was the leaders. This included comedians, comics, trumpet players, baseball players. These aren't leaders. These are puppets and clowns, and have been made celebrities, and usually say exactly what they know that the man wants to hear.
I mean, the deep part, we play that UC Berkeley speech from 1963 as just an example of how vicious, meaning just articulate how sharp his sword. They say the tongue is mightier than the sword. That's how sharp his sword was when it came to just slicing and dicing up the societal flaws or the societal specifications, the details, the job descriptions of who and what people were, and so we play that as, educational. But the point is, the thing was this: you ain't hear him using the N-word every 5 minutes, every 5 seconds. He ain't cursed one time, but he was slicing people. So, and that's another downfall of today's people, because once the FCC wasn't regulating the digital platforms, social media, they can say curse words, and people are loose with the tongue. They say the N-word. N-word ain't even supposed to be said if it's a possibility of a Caucasian hearing one speak, because that means they too much in your conversation. Outsiders. Chinese people say stuff that we don't get to hear. Other groups say stuff that they don't want us to hear. But so-called black folk, one of the only groups that's completely transparent online. They talk about each other like dogs. I mean, not in a critique way, not in an educational way. It's certain stuff that if it wasn't being done, nobody wouldn't have to say it. Because once it's said, it shouldn't be said no more. And we don't got to attack these individuals and attack each other. But we already attacking to the point it's time to elevate. And that's all groups. All groups should elevate and evolve and quit, tripping. Like, there's another example. There's people that talk about a group within a group, our group, and then say, yeah, that knowledge that y'all got right there and this philosophy that one can do this and that don't work. So something that's being done systematically within the U.S. society, let's say it's administrative. You got someone in our group saying something don't work administratively, out loud, meaning it may be racial based. This group does this, or this group believes that. But they saying that ain't gonna work. It's meaning them white folks ain't gonna recognize that. You ain't never supposed to go online and say that, whether you agree or not. People going on and said, man, that science y'all got, that knowledge y'all be kicking, that don't work downtown where the Caucasians is at. That's what they saying. Completely out of pocket. They ain't supposed to say that out loud, because then the Caucasian will come back, your own brother over there said it don't work. Every brother ain't a brother because of their color. That was Chuck D, Public Enemy, back in the 80s, one of them records they had out back then, which we can pull up on our Spotify, easy. Any of our platforms, they let everything right there be in front of us now. But that's when you know somebody don't know. So it ain't about keep on talking about nobody. But we had to mention a few things because the show is new. So we can say, man, these athletes be, as soon as you see a girl as an athlete, it's an unfair situation because she ain't coming at you personally. She's coming at you, the entity, it's the institution of sports that you're involved in. So one have to be very careful. But no, they get their emotions and their physiological impulses and feelings involved, and meaning impulsive, meaning reproductive stimuli or something like that. And they up in these women, man, messing up, causing bills, expenditures of finances, 18-year commitments for something that they ain't even committed to. There was a 5-minute situation. So just so no one took that seriously as this athlete was someone to lead. They play sports. They were already tall or whatever. I mean, they had a genetic disposition to play. It's entertainment. It wasn't never, nothing that we was looking at to advance.
See, they told us that you're a troublemaker.
And we ain't here to make it we ain't here to create and cause no trouble. We ain't trying to cause no problem with nothing, but just mentioning, because as we said, there's 3 factors: small-mindedness, people-based, average-mindedness, at least events, and great-mindedness, ideas and solutions. So we got a solution on what can be done for so-called businesses, but if we can't implement it ourselves, what's the use of saying it? Show and prove. So that's why our people showed and proved with the nonprofit they created, and they ain't looking for funding for no outside sources, because even Charleston White had dropped the name of a book where he said he showed how when you get these funding opportunities, the funding is often rooted in control. So that's just everything changed from there. I mentioned it, I think, yesterday, of this the book that was written about nonprofits and how they rose. So I mean, but anyway, like as I said, pardon us on how we don't really. We're still getting the mechanisms right and the technical aspects of the show, where we can, move to another level. And yes, the book, pardon me, I took a pause just for a split second so we could get, the book was called The Revolution Will Not Be Funded Beyond the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. Charleston White mentioned that 2017 book about how nonprofits end up controlling you in the end. So when we did empowermentforthepeople.org, we put it up ourselves. My people put that up. They put the idea. This is the three things you need to start a business, and then the book shows you how to start it. We give as much information as we can on the website because everyone is unique and different, so they just have to interpret. Well, I'm gonna do this, but we talked about fitness influencing, and they was breaking that down, how to be like the women is being strippers, and if they gonna be a stripper, they get more credibility for being a fitness influencer, studying about weightlifting and working out. And a lot of women are inspired by women who work and or have children and families, and how they able to fit in a work schedule and training. And these people, especially women, have males too, but women got there's the social media profiles, and they at gyms, and they training and doing things, and a lot can be done beyond what is imagined just from the past, and how the fitness revolution rose to where it is today. So that, so that's my point. Even with no resources, our people came up with that idea and implementation. So it can work, especially for women. It's going to work because women attract attention. If they, reasonably fit and attractive, people going to want to holler, so they can talk about fitness if they study and learn about it. Then that's where little girls should be led, not from all of these retired strippers. They took retired strippers in the early 2000s. All them reality shows was a bunch of strippers and low IQ minded people. They could have had developed intelligence, but they thrived on chaos and controversy, and it was a bunch of stripping. That's what that was. It was almost like negative. Well, not almost negative. It was almost scripted and genocidal. Who would even put them on TV? They need to be in community college and trying to get themselves right. They wasn't star quality. Star quality had a certain amount of poise. It had a certain amount of class and refinement that one would see. The people in the entertainment world weren't perfect, but we never saw that on the camera. We never saw what they was doing. It's because it was about upholding the people, the race. But these folk ain't even black no more. They just be looking black. They be from some other country calling themselves black because it's a flat word, black. Anybody could say that. They mama be Caucasian, they parent be from Africa, and that ain't the same as American descendant of slavery. So we ain't arguing about all of that part. We just saying, who is this? That's a plant. Because it ain't nothing that's beneficial to the group based on history. Look at the historic context of what Motown did and what they did at Philadelphia International and all of them labels back then in the 50s and 60s. They sent people to charm school. They taught them etiquette and how to act. Well, these folk, the worse they act, the more attention they get. So that's what Malcolm X and them used to call a sellout. You sold out the race for them individual accolades. So you and your family straight, but you poisoning the people. And we ain't saying it in a, righteous way of the conscious, because ain't no conscious. them conscious people was doing, what they was doing. They was infiltrated anyway. But the point is, don't play it like we don't see it. That's why if ain't nobody gonna say nothing like that sucker stuff for anybody who know the street.
The street is the street always.